Francis from the Bahamas. I'm in my first year of my PhD at the Nuffield Center for International Health and Development. So I started my PhD 1 year after I finished my master's, and it's completely different from what I expected it to be. Whereas with the master's program, you have a lot more structured time, schedules, and people telling you where you need to be and what you need to do, and deadlines and dates. With the PhD, it's almost completely different. One would think that having so much free time to yourself would be a good thing. But so far with my PhD, I'm finding out that that's actually one of the hardest things to do. It's just manage the time that you have and actually focusing on what exactly you have to do and when you actually need to do it. So I'm actually enjoying the fact that I have some freedom, but there are times when I definitely think that I need someone or something to tell me that I need to get this done by X date, and that's pretty much it. But with the PhD, you're pretty much on a journey where you have to self-manage yourself. So in terms of a typical day of my life as a PhD student, it's really funny because there is no set schedule. And there is nothing that tells you you need to be a certain place at a certain time. But for me, I try to structure my day so that I'm actually making the most of it. Even though, for example, if I wanted to skip a day, I technically can, and there would be no consequences, except for myself, but that's the different story. But for me, I tend to wake up at like 7:30, and I try to just have the first few hours to myself where I'm just centering myself in terms of preparing for the day. I read the news from home. I try to listen to some new music that is out because I love music. I try to chat with my friends and read all the messages that they sent me at like 2 a.m. in the morning because of the time difference. And then I get ready for the day in terms of thinking about what task I want to accomplish for my PhD, what I want to look at, what I want to read. And that typically begins at like 10 a.m. and lasts until about 5 or 6 in the day. There are a lot of coffee breaks that I think any PhD student or any researcher will tell you about. And during those breaks, you typically just have a break and you vent about your project. The fact that, you have all these frustrations and nobody else seems to understand, not even your supervisors, nobody else in the office tends to understand, and you have a mutual venting moment with everyone. But those are really helpful as well because you get to clear your head and you get to just have a community of people who are also very sympathetic towards what you're doing and can be very supportive as well. So yeah, that's typically how my day usually is structured. And usually in the evenings, I try to not check any more emails. So once I leave the office, I try not to look at my emails anymore. That has worked for the most part. There have been occasions when my supervisor has called me. When my supervisor called me at like 6 or 7 at night and asked me if I read his most recent email that he sent like after 5. And those are the moments when you're like, oh crap, I actually need to read a certain email or something like that. But those are rare occasions. But that just goes to tell you that there's no real typical day for a PhD student. So in terms of challenges, there are like numerous challenges that you will encounter. Well, I've encountered so far, both personally as well as in terms of my PhD project in itself. One of the things that I'm finding incredibly difficult right now is that since I'm proposing my own topic, I get to do whatever in the world that I want to look at. one of the biggest challenges for me is basically saying no to things that I want that are very incredibly interesting in the literature, and just having a very narrow focus. Because for the PhD and the fact that I get to choose whatever in the world that I want to look at, it's incredibly hard to not look at something that is incredibly interesting, that is outside of the scope of what I am on this journey to do. So that's really hard for me because I want to do it all. But as a PhD student, you simply don't have the time or the resources to do it all. And I've slowly learned this after a couple months. I know, like, for example, in my first supervision meeting with my supervisors, the only instruction they gave me was go and read. And, you know, what do you do with that? How do you begin to look at this wealth of knowledge and say, you know, this is what I want to look at? So that was hard for me, just, you know, filtering out all the other interesting things that I'm finding. You know, personally, it's also difficult in terms of just living in a different country and adjusting to England's very grey, very grim weather. You know, coming from the Bahamas where I'm used to, you know, over 300 days of sun, and coming to England where, you know, you have sun a couple hours a day, or you have weather where you have sun and rain and sometimes snow all in one day. That's a difficult adjustment. And, you know, just the small things like, you know, the time zone difference, where my friends are all, you know, 5 hours behind, and I'm getting messages at 3 a.m. in the morning because something interesting is happening at home. That's something that I've slowly learned to try to adjust to. But all that being said, it's like incredibly exciting at the same time because of the fact that, you know, what I'm looking at in my PhD is something that I'm genuinely very passionate about, and nobody else is telling me that I have to look at this, but I'm looking at what I'm looking at because I want to, and that makes it incredibly exciting at the same time. For me, I am still learning coping mechanisms. And, you know, I've asked the second and third year PhD students, and, you know, they all have their advice about how to deal with it. But, you know, I've slowly learned about what works for me. For me, I have a lot of coffee breaks. Just being able to talk to other first years and, you know, share in that experience of understanding that someone else is also facing some of the challenges that I'm facing. For me, music has been my biggest outlet. I love hip hop, I love rap music, and that's been like my thing. So there have been times in the day when I'm like, I have no idea how to, you know, think about the methods of what I want to work with, or, you know, I encounter like, oh, I can't find the data that I need to support my thinking. Or, you know, the Ministry of Health at home is not giving me the information that I need. And so that's incredibly difficult when you want to actually move on and progress. And, you know, in those moments, I just turn everything off and I turn my music up and I go for a walk around Leeds. And that's been my outlet. That's been my way of dealing with the stress, turning all the noise of the PhD off and turning my music up. I think for me, I have the most incredible supervisors, and I think it has actually caused a little bit of envy with the other PhD students because I have such great supervisors. So I have the same supervisor, the same main supervisor that I had when I was doing my master's here at Leeds. And so he just carried over to supervise my PhD, and that has been a really great blessing because we've already formed a relationship. So I already know his expectations, and I know what he likes and I know what he dislikes, And that's one of the biggest things I think you have to learn in starting a relationship with a supervisor is, do they like getting emails before your supervision meeting of exactly what you want to discuss, or how much time they need to read a document? So I already kind of had an understanding of that. So I was very lucky in that way. And my main supervisor is incredibly nurturing and always accessible to me. Maybe that will change in my second and third years, but right now it's been really incredible. Our supervisor meetings are incredibly dynamic. That's the way I would describe it. So I have 3 supervisors, and let's just say that sometimes they have very differing opinions about any particular issue or any particular question. So sometimes it's really interesting to see these titans have such differing opinions about how to approach one issue. And for me, sometimes that means just trying to find the medium of what they are saying and trying to figure out what is the best approach. Because what I'm finding is that even though I have such incredible relationship with my supervisors, they're not going to tell me exactly what to do, which is a good and a bad thing, because sometimes I feel like, okay, I just need you to tell me the answer here, but that's not going to ever happen. But I think that's a good thing. It's because for me, having those different opinions or having people tell you about different approaches I can take, it's really up to me to think about what is the best way and justifying why I think this is the best approach, because there is no one right answer. It's all about justifying and developing your thinking and defending your thinking. And so I'm at that stage now where I think I'm making choices, making deliberate choices, and thinking about the reason behind why I'm making those choices. And that's kind of showing, the evolution of this relationship that I'm having, both with my PhD topic, but also with my supervisors as well. Okay, well, one of the things that I would suggest always is to write down everything. And the reason why, write down everything from the very beginning, start writing. Just in terms of your thinking, your thoughts. Maybe it may be a stray thought while you're on a walk somewhere, you can pull out your iPhone or your phone and just write down that thought or write down that question. In your supervision meeting, write down everything as much as possible. In your talks with other students, write down that. For me, I carry a journal everywhere I go, for all my meetings, for all my, even on my breaks. No matter what I'm doing or where I am, I always have my journal with me, and I write down everything that I'm thinking or things that I found interesting about a conversation or a question that I may be thinking about after having a conversation with someone. I write those down, and what I'm finding now is I'm at that stage where I'm preparing my transfer report, is I'm looking back at all my thoughts throughout my journey, and I'm finding that I'm actually pulling from a lot of those initial questions and those initial thoughts, and I'm pulling all of those back into my actual report. So it comes in very, very handy, just writing from the very beginning. And that's one of the tips that other students have shared with me as well, and I found that to be incredibly useful. And it will actually help you too when you are thinking about not starting from the beginning when you have these reports to write, because you'll have something to, you have a skeleton to base your writing on. So that's one of the biggest tips I think I will share. For me, one of the things that I've learned is that it's very important to treat yourself very well and to reward yourself. And that's one of the ways that I keep myself motivated. It may be just the very simple things of buying yourself that extra piece of cake or, going out with friends, or, taking a break on the weekends and, you know, doing something that you haven't done before. For me, those are the things that have kept me motivated. And the fact that I always try to think about the bigger picture. The fact that, you know, why did I start this PhD in the first place? What impact do I want to have? And, you know, I started to think about, you know, what is going to, you know, the end of it. You know, I always keep in my mind that picture of me in my graduation robe and in my hat. That is the thing that I always picture when things get very, very challenging, because that's where I want to get. And I think once you have that picture in your mind, and once you think about why you're doing what you're doing, you'll be able to overcome those challenges, and you'll be able to stay motivated on this journey. You know, one of my favorite parts of being a PhD student so far is the fact that everyone suddenly, overnight, looks at you completely different, completely differently. When I began to walk the hallway and I met with my professors that taught me during my master's, and all of a sudden the conversations that we would have is completely different, and they really began to look at you in a different capacity, and that's really rewarding for me, and that's probably my favorite part of just announcing that I'm a PhD student. Even to like friends at home and my family, when I tell them that I'm doing this PhD, all of a sudden they light up and people begin to respect you a little bit differently. Even though they don't have a really good understanding of the fact that, oh, you're only in your first few months or whatever. Just the fact that you got accepted into a PhD program, and me being accepted in the PhD program, has been my favorite part about doing this so far. So 20 years from now, I hope to be working in the policy environment, hopefully with an international regional organization in the Caribbean, and looking at improving the health systems of the Caribbean countries. It's a wrap, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope it's useful.